just had 7, and it looks like we got a pretty good crowd. So why don't we go ahead and get started? A couple of things up front. I know Larry's on. Larry, if you could kind of give us an update about the gardens and what their plans and are or are not at this moment.
So we are still pretty much in the COVID mode that the Denver City and County of Denver tells us about what to do. But we are starting to bring more and more volunteers in all the time. I'm still hesitant to do that with our volunteer group because our age group is a little bit higher, a little bit more in the vulnerable range. But as things change, I would suspect by midsummer, we may be back to kind of a full group meeting on Wednesdays. It just depends. And to say just depends is a huge area right now. As far as what's happening in the gardens, buds are popping up. The place is looking great. It's worth going through for a walk. The place is beautiful. I just recently received a donation to the garden bonsai collection from Allen Hills. So we're working on that. The trees that are at Chatfield are looking great. Some of them will start moving up. The ones that are a little bit hardier. But generally, it's pretty much business as usual. And as I look at my records from what we've done every year since I started there, April has been a very dangerous month for doing anything with bonsai outside.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to be very conservative with taking things out and bringing things on display. And I have something in a bonsai bed outside that has not frozen all winter. I bring it out and even set a native and I put it on the bench, and every night for the next 3 weeks it freezes at night. That's not a good scenario for our root system. So I think for everybody, being patient with what's going on in the spring here is really important.
So thanks, Larry. So for those of you that are not aware, I mean, one of the things that Larry sponsors is Larry is the curator of the bonsai garden at Denver Botanic Gardens down on York Street. And so during the summer months, basically every Wednesday from 9 to 12 in non-COVID times, we kind of have a workshop. People go down, they bring trees, or maybe they work on some trees that Larry needs to work on. And in the wintertime, we go to Chatfield Gardens, which is on the southwest corner of Denver, and work in their greenhouse. So hopefully as things begin to open back up, those kind of opportunities will open up as well. So if you're free on those Wednesday mornings, you might want to just pencil that into your calendar at some point when it opens up. It's a fun thing to do and a good place to go.
Just one thing to add, Dave, and that is for the volunteer group. In the past, it was just show up and join us, but the organization of how volunteers are going to be working at the gardens has changed a lot since COVID. And now you'll have to be registered and all that stuff. And because we have small children and little trees around, you're required to do a security check too, which most of us have probably experienced sometime in our life already. I know as an educator, we had to be on file with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. So all that stuff is now happening at the Botanic Garden level.
And the last word I got from the gardens that they sent to me in the email is that there won't be any in-person meetings in their buildings through June. So, it'll be at least July before we would be able to use one of their facilities to hold an in-person meeting, assuming that. All right, well, with that, I'll turn it over to to introduce our visiting artist tonight, and we'll get on with the meeting.
Okay, thank you, David. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. Well, we are always looking for new sources of inspiration for our bonsai. And one of the sources that I frequently turn to for that kind of information is Todd Schlafer. And Todd said, you need to connect with Sergio Cuan. And I said, great, okay. So Sergio and I have been, as he mentioned, been communicating via email for several months. And as by way of introduction, I went to his website. And, you know, Sergio is he's an artist and a graphic designer. And if you haven't visited his website, it's one of the most beautifully designed websites that I've seen about bonsai. So I want to quote, if I may, from his website about his experience and his sort of philosophy of bonsai. He says in his website, I first saw a bonsai tree when I was a teenager, and when I learned what these curious tiny trees were, the marriage between art and nature simply captured my imagination. Bonsai to me is a unique art form that holds commonalities to painting, drawing, and sculpture. But unlike those art forms, bonsai is alive. Practicing bonsai is an intimate dialogue between artist and tree. It is cause and effect. It is interactive. That give and take is what gives bonsai its own unique dimension. It's fascinating to think that in a very small, contained space, you can experience nature in all its complexity and mystique. And I think that's a wonderfully written description of what it's like to work with bonsai. So, without further ado, I introduce you to our guest artist tonight, Sergio Cuan.
Thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate it. And again, thank you to you guys for being here tonight and giving me the opportunity to share with you guys my passion for bonsai, more specifically, my passion for deciduous bonsai. So I've been doing bonsai for quite some time, but I would say that in the last maybe 10 years or so is really when I apply myself to the art form in a much deeper way than I was previous to that. But in any case, I'm going to share, I have a deck for you guys that I want to share with you. And just very quickly, the deck is divided, sort of segmented into three sections. The first section, I'm going to kind of show you a few pictures of my garden to kind of give you a sense of my growing environment. And then I'm going to show you work my development of my own trees. And the last section has, I think, four or five, can't quite remember, four or five case studies that specifically sort of dive a little more deeply into specific techniques such as root grafting, for example. So as I dive through this slide presentation, please feel free to ask any questions that you may think of. Okay. So I am going to. I think Tom, you need to allow me to share or no. Okay. I think I can just do it. Yep. Okay. Very good. So I'm gonna share my deck and you guys should see it just about now. And I am going to let's see, you okay. You should see big sort of introduction page in your screens now.
Yes.
Sergio, before you begin, can you tell us where you are, please?
I am in New Jersey,
Okay.
northern New Jersey. So for all intents and purposes, what they call the Northeast. We get very nasty winters here. But yes, I am located in New Jersey.
Thank you.
So I'll skip this page. Obviously, Tom, thank you for that wonderful intro. And I'm going to go right ahead into sharing with you guys some photographs of my garden. My garden was built, I'd say maybe about 7 years ago. The first piece that I built in the garden was, let me just pick up a pen here so I can highlight it, was this arbor back over here. I needed some kind of structure. If before I built the garden, I really had cinder blocks and pressure treated wood and wood as as part of my benches, and I got tired of it honestly, and I wanted a place where I could appreciate my trees, not only work with the trees, but also be able to appreciate it. So one of the things that I needed to build is an arbor. Even here in the northeast, we get in the middle of the summer, we get very intense sunlight. So I needed to some sort of shade structure for my deciduous trees. And from there, from that arbor, everything sort of grew out of there. My garden is by no means large at all. It's kind of small and intimate, but large enough to house some fairly big trees, which you will see in a second. Another view of it. I have a variety. I try to have a a very diverse collection of deciduous trees. They range from Japanese maples to beech to lindens to elms, hornbeams, and such. One of my favorites in the gardens is old chochubai. This was taken, I believe, early last spring in 2020. Another section I have.
Sergio,
Yes, go ahead.
where
Please.
did that chojubai come from? Did you?
That let me just go back to that real quick. That actually came originally from Michael Hagedorn.
I suspected.
Yes, because nobody else grows chochobai like Michael, and Michael actually, I think, is single-handedly responsible for introducing the chochobai to the U.S. in a really big way.
Yeah.
But yeah, this tree came from Michael.
Yeah,
I
beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah, it's such a. They're very quirky trees, as you guys may have heard. They drop leaves in the middle of August just because, and if you don't know enough about them, you think that you've done something wrong and the tree is dying, etc. But it really is, they're doing their thing. It's a tree really truly with a mind of their own. This is obviously another view of the garden. I have throughout the garden, I have some water features, such as this one. Have large vessels full of water that contain perennial water lilies, which you will see in a second. Another view. Here is a chochubai right in here, and another water feature down here. This was taken, I believe, in the middle of July or August of last year. This is another view. This is kind of like the center of the garden. And just to give you a sense of scale, this tree here is a big Yatsubusa elm. From the base of the soil level to the top of the tree is 4 feet. This tree is 4 feet tall, just to give you a sense of scale here. This maple, Japanese maple, a little further away from us is 3 feet tall. And there's like a small Amur maple down here. Back here is an Arakawa maple, and over here all the way to the right is a Japanese beech forest. Some of these trees you will see in the next section of the presentation. Another view of the garden going a little bit to the left. I have really good light, as you can see, throughout the day. So growing conifers in my garden is not a problem at all. This is a Bonjin Japanese red pine. And I'm sure you've noticed, I used to have grass growing in my garden, and I also got rid of it, and I put gravel just because it gives me that kind of very clean look, which is and relatively easy to maintain. This is a close-up of one of the water vessels, and as you can see here, the water lily. They bloom. They tend to bloom in June, July, and a little bit in August. And then they're dormant. This tree you will see a little bit later in the presentation. This is a ball cypress, a weeping ball cypress. This is an older picture of the garden, maybe taken 3 or 4 years ago in autumn. We get beautiful, beautiful autumn colors here.
Mm.
Similarly with Japanese maples, they color up really beautifully. The tree that you're seeing here in the center of the photograph is an Arakawa Japanese maple. Again, you will see that in a second. This is that big elm, Yatsubusa elm. Again, they get really beautiful, beautiful yellow color in autumn. And the park is just incredible on this tree.
Mm.
Another shot of autumn. I like taking pictures in the fall for obvious reasons. Even though my favorite, I think my favorite season, believe it or not, for deciduous trees is winter, only because we work deciduous to be admired in winter, so we can appreciate their ramification.
Yeah.
But they certainly can be very enjoyable in autumn as well. Arakawa, and again, this is a very reliable, performs very reliably in autumn. No matter what, this tree always gets beautiful, beautiful autumn color. Same Arakawa, just a little bit a few years back, and this is in early winter. Like I think I took this picture right before I took the trees in. For the winter, I think it was middle of December. And that is the last picture for this section. And then I'm gonna jump into the actual work. Any questions so far?
Yeah, actually, Sergio, I have a question for you. This is Gordon Bonin. And I appreciate your comment about the beauty of deciduous trees in the wintertime. I love that too, the look of the trees in the wintertime. Obviously out here, the winters are really kind of cold and you don't really get to appreciate that because you have to protect them. But I grew up in Connecticut, so I'm sort of fairly familiar with the Northeast, and it is, even in New Jersey, it gets pretty severe. So you mentioned you brought your trees inside. Is that the main way you're protecting them? And just in general, how do you get to enjoy your deciduous trees in the wintertime? Because I do think they're so beautiful at that time of year. But if you have to protect them all the time and are worried about them, how do you enjoy them?
Well, I mean, I don't, unfortunately, it's not like I have a display area where I can enjoy them. I usually sort of have a small tokonoma in my studio, and I put them there, and that's how I enjoy them. Once in a while, I actually store them in put them away in a garage in an unheated garage. That's how that's how I keep them throughout the winter, and then they go out, of course, in spring. And greenhouse right now is in the works, but I still don't have one. Not the one that I want. It's just it's been a little bit financially. It's been a little bit prohibitive for me to have it. So, but it is in the works right now. But I've been keeping them in a cold garage for many years, and has worked well, fortunately. But again, I put them in a tokonoma, once in a while, and that's how I get to enjoy them. And also, of course, when I take pictures of them, I get to enjoy their basically their beauty.
I wanted to ask about the display stand you had in the garden. You have some copper flashing at the base. Is that to protect from rodents, or
No,
is that aesthetic?
It's totally aesthetic, to be honest, completely honest with you. Somebody did tell me, which I was not aware. I'm gonna go back. This is what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oops. Right here. Yeah, right there. Yeah, I did it just for aesthetics. I just kind of wanted to, I thought it looked cool. But somebody actually mentioned to me that which I didn't know, and I learned something, that copper actually prevents from slugs from going up. They hate copper. But you know, honestly, even if they didn't have it, I don't have a problem with flags, so that wouldn't be an issue for me. But it just gave a nice finishing touch to the base of that base. Just so you know, that is a 6x4 post, and it goes down about 3 feet into the ground with concrete. That's just to hold these trees. These trees, that elm is probably about 150, I want to say, about 150, 160 pounds, something like that. But anyway, I wanted something. It was designed specifically to house the bigger trees right in the center of the garden. And then, of course, around the garden, under the arbor, and elsewhere, there are houses, you know, medium to smaller trees.
They do look nice, and the copper looks great.
Yeah, it looks kind of nice, right? And then if you notice here, and then it kind of picks up the copper from this large container here, so it kind of brings the color in a little bit. So I try to sort of combine colors and such. I've also noticed that I have painted my post, my stands basically, because not that I think that just raw wood looks bad. I think it looks beautiful, but to my eye, it looks a little busy sometimes. So I wanted to have something that looked really, really clean, so that my eye would not be sort of distracted. But
Sergio, whose pot is that for the big tree?
whose pot?
Yeah.
Byron Myrick pot. Yep.
Oh.
That's a Byron Myrick pot.
Beautiful.
It's huge. That pot is like, yeah, it's quite beautiful. Yeah.
Actually, Sergio, I don't know if you mentioned it, but trees collected trees, or mostly have they been grown by someone, or what's the source for the tree?
Yeah, that's a good question, David. I like to, I mean, most of the ones that well, you'll see in a second when I go into the work.
Okay.
I like to have a little bit of variety of everything. I've bought trees that are really developed, right? And all the way from that to literally growing sticks in pots, basically. Like I have several Japanese maples now in little pots, and they're there will not be anything for another at least 20-25 years. So I think that every phase, growing from a little stick in a pot to buying something that is more finished, all those phases kind of teaches you something about the process of creating bonsai. So I'm not a believer personally that, I think some people say, oh, you have to grow, I like to grow everything myself and take it all the way to the finished product, which is a long process, right? So I admire that. I respect that. But I do think that that there is something, for at every phase, there's something interesting for me. So, and you'll see trees in different kinds of development, if you will, once we go into the work. I'm gonna jump right into the work, and the very first one is that Arakawa that you just saw. This is a picture in 2014. This is about 2 years after I purchased this tree, and I got this tree actually from eBay. I won it in an auction. And twin trunk Arakawa, I'm not sure how familiar you are with that, but Arakawas are beautiful. You get pretty much everything with Arakawa. You get bark texture. You get, the fine ramification that all Japanese maples have. And of course, you have beautiful autumn color. So you really have so much with these maples. So anyway, so this is right before, this was taken in March of 2014. And this is right before I styled it. And the next picture you'll see. By the way, these long shoots that you're seeing here, they were grown on purpose because I anticipated doing at least one either thread graft or approach grafts right in here. What happened, I'll explain quickly. This section right in here, when the tree was sent to me, shipped to me, the very top, which kind of grew this way like this, broke off. So I brought a side branch that was growing kind of downwards like this, brought it up in order to create my new apex. So I needed, I felt like I needed to place a branch right in this spot right here. This was sort of becoming an outside curve for me, so I needed to place something in there, because otherwise, to my eye, it looked odd. So I grew a couple of these long shoots in order to anticipate, again, doing an approach graft or a thread graft. In this case, I did an approach graft, you will see in a second. And this is right after it was styled. Now, I did a few things here. One of them is I turned the tree counterclockwise so that, let me go back, these two trunks, oops, these two trunks here were parallel to the viewer. And you shouldn't ever have that ever, two trunks or whatever it is parallel to the viewer. You always want a little bit of directionality to your design. It makes your composition a little, more dynamic. So what I did was just turn my front just slightly so this smaller trunk faces a little bit away from you. That gives you a little more of that makes the composition a little more dynamic. And this is in my, I'm marking my new front with a chopstick, which you're seeing here, and this is completely wire. There are some folks that believe that deciduous trees should never be wired, should be clip and grow. In my experience, I always highly recommend a combination of wiring and clip and grow, as I call it, clip and grow, will give you, in my view, will give you the best excuse me, the best results. I think that with the combination of those two things, wiring and clip and grow, gives you the most variety in the movement of your branches. So things that when you just rely on clip and grow, it kind of gives you a certain kind of angularity to your branching that I think can get a little bit sort of expected a little bit. It becomes a little boring because everything kind of feels the same way. So with wiring, you can get some bends to some of the to the branches, and then combine that with the clip and grow can give you just really nice natural variety in your general structure. So you can see here how I brought one of those long whips around, and I'm doing my, here's where I made my approach graft, and I'm holding it in place, the whole thing, with push pins. Some folks like to use, which I'm using now, by the way, I'm using grafting nails, but push pins just work just fine. The critical part about any kind of grafting is that that union, that point of where you join the two cambium layers cannot move at all for the duration of that process. And usually, in my experience with Japanese maples, I've been able to do an approach graft within one growing season. Sometimes it may just go into the next season. So we're talking about maybe potentially, maybe not quite a year, but it changes a little bit. This is about a year, 2 years later, the tree. You're noticing how much more developed the branching is getting. You'll notice also here, I almost forgot. What happened was that unfortunately that that approach graft that you saw in the previous slide actually got snapped off because I was kind of careless when I was moving the tree one time, and I snapped it off. So I needed to restart it again. So I used the same whip or shoot and try another branch from it to do my approach graft there. So that put me back like about a year, but again, stuff happens. Down here below on the right, this started as a root graft, and I kind of fell in love with it, and I decided to create a small little tree right on the right side of the trunk. So I kind of kept the whole thing, and I'm still kind of growing it to thicken it up a little bit. But I sort of like that little detail, unexpected detail in the composition. And here is the tree about 2 more years. So jumping off 2 more years. Now it is in a coil pot, which I think it fits a lot better the design rather than the oval that it was before. And you will notice too how much more developed the approach graft is already. At this point, it already has taken. And if you remember a few slides back, what a tiny little thing this was, and now it's kind of getting fully developed as a as a real apex. And of course, you're noticing here how much more developed the little, what started as a root graft, and now it's turning into sort of like a little tree all the way to the right. And this is in spring. I believe this was taken in spring 2020. And now I'm actually, I don't have the picture, but I did take some recent pictures just a couple of days ago, and I did a couple more root grafts just to kind of keep improving the Nebari. So 2014 and 2000, so about what is it, 6 years from the 2 pictures. Okay. Any questions on this specific tree?
Yeah, Sergio, it seems like you're doing a lot of grafting over the years,
yes,
and very successfully. So how does that affect your fertilizing schedule or your fertilizing composition?
I have to say it does not. When you say how does it affect what exactly you're saying, like the amount I may be fertilizing, etc.
Yeah, I'm talking about how you might change your fertilizing schedule, or how you accommodate the grafting. Let me say accommodating the grafting in your fertilizing regimen.
My fertilizing regimen is usually, just to kind of give you broad strokes on that, I would say that anything that is in high development, I fertilize quite heavily. And anything that is more in refinement, I hold back usually until after the leaves harden off, which usually in this area happens around early to mid June. So I hold back, but this tree back in 2014, I definitely was fertilizing a lot heavier than I am right now, just because I don't want to start getting very coarse growth. The beauty of the deciduous trees, of course, is the fineness of that branching. And in particular, Japanese maples, you can destroy that very easily. Especially in the apex, things thicken up very, very quickly. And certainly when you're jacking the tree with a lot of fertilizer, that certainly is not gonna help matters. But as far as if I have a tree in refinement, let's just say, and I do a graft, I just follow what again. So I will not fertilize a tree until the leaves harden off in June, regardless of what I'm doing as far as like whether it's a root graft or whether it's a thread graft or approach graft. That really doesn't change, at least for me, doesn't change my my fertilizing regimen.
And largely that's because you're doing the grafting in the spring, correct?
Yes, the tree grafting, and again, I'm just giving you a little taste of what I do. We can talk about like specifically about grafting. We can be here a whole day or 2 days, but the grafting, not so much the approach grafting because it doesn't matter, but for thread grafting, and I don't know how many of you, maybe many of you are familiar with the thread graft, but you have to do that in late winter. Otherwise, you have to do it when the buds are really, really tight to the branches, because otherwise you are going to damage those buds, which is not a good thing. So I usually do my thread grafting, whatever thread grafting I'm doing, usually start about mid-February here. That's well several weeks before the trees wake up.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sure. Next example is a Japanese white beech. And this photograph was taken back in 2004, I believe, when it was imported from Japan. And it was imported through Brussels Bonsai. And I believe this is a picture in their nursery. So this tree somehow happened to land at, I don't know if you guys have heard of the Kennett Collection in Pennsylvania. It's probably the biggest and best private collection in the US. It's owned by Doug Paul, and he has just, the place is just incredible. And he has imported a lot of, trees from Japan, and I'm talking like kokofu, great trees, basically in his garden. So somehow this ended up in his collection, and in there somebody planted it on a slab. Back in 2014, he had a sale and part of his collection, and I was able to get this tree. So again, from 2004 we go to 2014, and this is what the tree is looking like. So I purchased a tree from that sale, and this was the original front of it, but this is actually just a few hours after I got back, and I put it back in inside of my unheated garage, looking at it, and I realized that I think the back for me, which I'm going to show you in a second, became a much better front than what it was. So here was my my intended front. So I flipped it, right? This was the back, and only because the main tree had a much better movement than the one on the back. I wasn't sure why the other was preferred as a front, to be honest with you, but to my eyes this looked like it had the biggest potential. Now this tree was pretty well ramified, but overall I felt like the structure itself felt very unorganized to me, especially at this scale. Feels that things are not, they don't flow together well. Branches are going in and out, and they're sometimes they're conflicting with each other. So I needed to kind of work to establish a little more of an organized overall canopy for the forest. So here is a year later, and I am now lowering some branches, because here I'll show you again. For me, what I'm seeing is this. I'm seeing a sort of lopsided triangle, and it didn't give me the enough sense of stability. So working towards something, a silhouette that gave me a sense of more of a stable, mature forest, I started lowering the branches so that I could create that triangle that was originally like this. Now it would become more of a flat, if you will, base to it, more of a stable base. At this point, I thought that the soil also was way too mounded. I wanted to lower the profile of that of the soil, and I felt like a lower profile soil would be more in keeping with the overall proportions of the tree. To give you a sense of scale, uh, this slab here is actually almost 3 feet wide. Just to give you a little bit of a sense of the size of the tree. This is obviously same tree in August. This photograph was taken 1 week before it was exhibited at the 2016 Nationals. So I was lucky enough to get it accepted, and this is what it looks like in full leaf. And 3 months later, I decided to exhibit this at the Winter Silhouette in Kannapolis, North Carolina. That happens every year in a beautiful drainage that they have down there. And notice I'm sure you notice in the glass or the plexiglass table, I decided to, this was, by the way, and I'm sorry, I don't have a picture from the Nationals. I actually took one, but I did not like the way it came out, so I never show it. But this was shown in the Nationals with the glass table, and I wanted to create a sense of like almost like a floating forest of sorts. But I wanted to do it in a way that was hopefully in an elegant, understated way, and not something that called too much attention. So with things like this, you always take risks, right? When you kind of push the envelope a little bit, you're gonna get, there's a little bit of controversy around it. I got some feedback that this should never, this tree should never be exhibited on a plexiglass table. It should be on a traditional wood stand. And then other folks that are a little more, I guess, not sure if I want to say open-minded, but they were a little more sort of, liking the idea basically that this was kind of breaking with tradition. So they kind of, they appreciated that. So anyway, I liked it because also I like the contrast, the cold sort of a nature of the material itself, the plexi, against the warmth of the tree, the moss, the rocks. Gave me some kind of beautiful contrast in my view. And this is the most recent one that I have. So notice how more mature that canopy, that silhouette is. Now we have more of a stable base at the bottom. It's got more kind of a rounded. That's kind of very typical of the deciduous rather than these sort of pointed apex. Or apices, they're usually very rounded. Again, playing with the same slab. But notice now that the soil level is lower. This was because I repotted it the year prior to taking this photograph. So I lowered the profile, and I think it gave the whole thing better proportions.
Absolutely.
Overall.
Absolutely.
Notice how the branches are going all outwards away from the trunks, but in a way that they're all sort of almost synchronizing with each other. When I went to Japan in 2013, I went twice. My first was 2013, and I went to visit the famous Taisho-en nursery. And Mr. Urushibata, who owned the nursery, said something to me that stuck with me. He said, with trees, especially deciduous, everything should flow like a river. Everything should flow like water. There shouldn't be any part where it kind of catches your eye. So that sort of thing really stuck with me. So I've been trying to work hard at trying to, I think that the tricky part about it is that you do not want your tree to become very mechanical, right? You want certain imperfections in the tree because that's what gives it their naturalness. But at the same time, all the parts of every single part of the tree should sort of speak to each other and should be, sort of all cohesive and all sort of speaking the same language, if you will. All right, and I'm jumping now to the next one. Before I do, any questions on this speech?
It's beautiful.
Thank you, Tom.
It's really amazing.
By the way, I just should say, beech. I don't know if any of you have Japanese beech. Very different from European beech. If anybody wants to get into beech, I would recommend European, much easier to keep. Japanese beech are really, they're definitely not your beginner's beech, if you will. They will give you a run for your money. They're somewhat difficult, especially older trees like this. These lower branches are really, really a challenge to keep healthy and alive, because they're apically dominant, super dominant, and I have to be very aggressive how I keep my tips sort of in check. Otherwise, very quickly, I am going to lose energy on the bottom branches, and they will die, and obviously will destroy my design. So this particular piece is really a challenge to keep overall very kind of healthy, and and all that stuff. So definitely Japanese beech is quite tricky, or at least in my experience, I find it kind of tricky for sure. Much more difficult than the Japanese maples, for example.
Sergio, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, it's Pignon J from BNut.
Oh, hello.
And my name's Rennie. You mentioned on that website that this tree was in line for repotting, and I was wondering why. I asked you if you planned to reduce the root ball further, lower it anymore, and it sounded like no, you weren't intending on it.
No, I think that so it needs to be repotted. In fact, I looked at it today, and it's starting to swell. So I am gonna probably repot it this weekend, possibly. But here's the thing. So no, I don't think it would be wise to lower that the amount of soil. It is really pushing, I think, the limits of what the tree can handle. I'm comfortable right now, at least for me, aesthetically. I'm comfortable with where it is right now as far as the height of the soil. So I think that if I lower it, if I made it any thinner, overall, that the mass of that soil, I think I would be risking the life of the tree for sure. But now it needs repotting because it's not growing. It's in a lot of soil, so I need to kind of refresh that the soil and cut some roots back, and the whole process basically, just to put some new soil in there. But yeah, I definitely don't want to lower that any more than I have.
And do you work the soil as it sits on the slab? You don't remove the composition from the slab, do you?
I do. Oh, sure, I do. In fact, if I were to grab that main tree, I can lift the whole thing off of the slab. It's not even tied to the slab. It just sits on top. It doesn't move, right? It doesn't move because the roots kind of sort of start sticking to the slab and such. But when it's time for repotting, I can actually literally pick up, grab the trunk, the main trunk, and lift the whole thing off of the slab. But yeah, I will take it off of the slab, and then I'll do my repotting. Yeah. You guys may recognize this gentleman by the name of Ryan Neal. And the next piece that I want to show you guys is a linden that I got from Mr. Neal back in 2018. And this is him. I believe this tree was featuring about 2 live streams, and this is the last one that he did. And here Ryan is sort of editing heavily. This tree was kind of full, much more even throughout, and he took some branches to create some more interesting negative spaces, which I agree. And then I purchased a tree from him. And this is, believe, 2008, no, 2019 January. What was happening was, and Ryan did tell me this, unfortunately, the tree in his garden got mowed down. I think it was 2018, got mowed down. No, sorry, 2019, it got mowed down by deer, basically. And they took some branches off. You know, they made a little bit of a mess of it. Luckily, the tree bounced back, and I picked up this tree at the Nationals in 2000. I said 2019. No, this was all 2018, and then this photograph was taken January 2019. That's what was happening. So, just very quickly, to my eye, very, you know, just sort of analyzing this design very quickly. What was happening is this. I was seeing this, just bar branching almost across the entire structure of the tree. So whatever I needed to do, I needed to get away from that, right? So this is a tree right after it was styled. I believe this was right, I think in January or February that I wired this tree. So it may look like the tree kind of grew more branches or whatever, but they were all there. It's just that they needed to be repositioned. So again, from here, obviously I cut back some branches and such to here. So it was, a lot of it was there. It just needed to kind of be repositioned so that we avoided that straight across bar branching effect that the tree had. The tree that same year to 2019, I think. Yeah, believe this was taken in June. They have beautiful linden. It has beautiful, gorgeous, sort of like a chartreuse green in the spring. They're absolutely gorgeous, and very extremely flexible trees to work with. One of the most flexible deciduous trees that I've ever worked with, and extremely durable in terms of winter. These guys, you throw them like 5-degree Fahrenheit weather, they don't care. They're really, really, really tough, even in pots. Sometimes I worry more about the pot cracking than the tree dying. I mean, however, with that being said, I'm not gonna fool you guys and say, well, I'll just keep it outside, I don't care. No, this tree is well protected, but I know that they're extremely, extremely tough. Nothing like Japanese maples in that sense. So underused, these are endemic to Europe. So I think that's one reason why you don't see a lot of specimens in the US. This is probably one of the best ones that I've seen in the US. Walter Powell, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with his stuff, but he works with a lot of lindens. And this was actually ground grown by Randy Knight. And then somebody, a practitioner, bought it, and then Ryan Neal got it from this person. I don't know, I forget his name. And I think Ryan Neal's been working with the tree since 2010, I believe. And this is the very last work that I did. This is this was styled in December of 2020. This is the last work that I did on it. Again, they develop very quickly. They back bud very readily without a problem. And yeah, so I'll just keep working on it. It's really a pleasure working with this tree. It's got a massive trunk. It's not that big, it's not that tall, but it's got a lot of presence. This tree, it's got this sort of a lot of character, almost feeling a little bit like an oak in a way. Beautiful. So here you can compare 2019, 2020. Any questions on the linden?
Have you seen people using the American linden?
I have not. I have not. I'm not familiar. I think American linden, I believe, has even larger leaves. It's odd because this is a little leaf linden. That's what it's called, but the leaves are not so little. You know, they're really not. It doesn't bother me because the tree's got a somewhat of a massive presence. So the larger leaves do not bother me. But if this tree were any smaller, I think it would be a little problematic for sure. The leaves, and they reduce somewhat, but they're still kind of large. So American linden, I believe that it has even larger leaves. I could be wrong on that, but I think that they do have larger leaves. They're supposed to get beautiful yellow color in the autumn. I will say that this is one tree that has given me a lot of issues, giving me good autumn color. You know what, the leaves basically just kind of brown out and they drop. And I have not been able to get color out of this guy yet. But that's my only complaint about the tree. It's like I was hoping to get this beautiful yellow color in the autumn. I have not been able to do so. I'm not sure why.
Sergio, we have a question from the chat. Someone's saying they have issues, they have fungal issues on the leaves of the lindens that they have every year, and they're wondering, is that something that you encounter? And if so, what do you do about it?
Sure. I have to say, in this linden, I don't believe that my issue is fungus. But overall, I recommend Mancozeb for any kind of fungal issue. I do know that large Yatsubusa elm that you saw when I was showing you guys my garden, I've had issues with fungal issues with that elm, and I've used Mancozeb, and that thing works like magic. That's my recommendation. I combine that or switch every now and then with something like a copper fungicide that you can get, you know, at a Home Depot or whatever. But the Mancozeb, I have to say, has worked incredibly well. Some folks, for whatever reason, they tell me that no, that's only for conifers, but not so. I mean, it works great for deciduous as well. But no, again, to answer your question directly, I have not gotten any fungal issues, or I was not aware of any fungal issues with linden. However, now that you mentioned that, one problem that I did have with this is that the Japanese beetles love this tree. But that, I know that's a different issue. That's a pest issue, not a fungal issue. But they absolutely love to chew on this tree.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Kashima Japanese maple. Back in 2007, I bought this tree from Suthin, which I'm sure you guys have heard of him, of course. And this is, I think this tree is maybe, this photograph is maybe 2 or 3 years after I got the tree, something like that. This is what it looked like. And what happened was that Kashima has a tendency, much like Kiyohime Japanese maple, they have a tendency to wake up very early. At the slightest provocation, they sort of, the buds start swelling. I made the bad mistake back in, I think it was 2011 or 12, that to think that if I put the tree outside in the cold, it's gonna hold back, it's gonna slow things down. But what happens is once the trees start, you know, to basically push, it's you know, their winter hardiness just goes out the window. They're not, you know, they lose that winter hardiness, right? So I believe that the tree, if I remember correctly, when I put it outside, it experienced 20-degree weather for a couple of nights straight. And what happened was, and I'll show you in a second, this is what happened. About 2 weeks later, I noticed that the buds usually are very bright red on Japanese maples. They were turning like a dark red. And I've also noticed that a lot of the branching had this wrinkling on, you know, on the surface, which is never a good sort of indication, or so I knew that the tree was in trouble. In fact, I thought I killed it. But also say that the tree, this is what the tree looked like for what I was able to salvage from the tree, whatever was left alive. So the big sort of apex or part of the tree that was going this way completely died off, right? So my intent was to create a new apex with this little branch right here. You'll see in a second. The tree was repotted. I took a lot of dead roots out. This was, I think, a year after that happened. And I'm starting to notice some healthy growth here, which was a good indication, but it took the tree a long, long time within that growing season to get sort of going again. This is the following year, and now I'm getting now pretty confident that the tree is sort of getting back to being healthy essentially. And notice how I'm starting to wire certain parts of it in order to start kind of forming some kind of rough idea for the future structure of the canopy. Skipping another year, going a year ahead, and you can see how the tree is developing. Now I'm getting some good extensions on the growth, and now I'm confident that the tree can take some wiring. And if you remember, that little side now is starting to grow into a real sort of apex. The tree had beautiful nebari, and that's the only reason why I actually kept the tree. It had a beautiful, as you can see, beautiful lower trunk movement with a great nebari. And this is a tree, I believe, five or 6 years later from the time that it almost died. Believe it or not, I kind of expedited the process here by defoliating the tree a couple times during that time, and that gave me another chance within the same growing season to grow to kind of almost double the amount of ramification that I could have had had I just grown it without defoliating it within that growing season. Spring shot. They usually get this red kind of orangey color. They're beautiful. And yes, so that's right. So 2012 to 2017. So that's what, 5 years between the two. And again, I was able to kind of expedite that process through a couple of defoliations in between. Defoliation, again, is something that I don't freely recommend, only because you need to know the tree very well. If the tree is not really doing well, not strong enough, it will not be able to handle a full defoliation. However, if they're healthy, and I thought that this tree could handle it, and it did, I was able to again defoliate it a couple of times. Any questions before I jump into the next example? Okay. Going to the next one, Japanese maple. Believe it or not, it does not really look like much of a Japanese maple. This was grown by Randy Knight again, and I got it from another practitioner. And this was another case where this was the original front of the tree. And for good reason, because the back of it had a lot of dead wood, a lot of ugly, big chunks of dead wood, big scar, etc. Now, the takeaway from this example that I'm going to show you is that you cannot make a tree be what is not what is meant to be. This tree will never be your classic feminine Japanese maple. This tree wanted to be more like an oak in a way. So looking at the back, I said to myself, you know, maybe now we can make the dead wood and the scar be features of the design rather than try to hide it by using this as a front. Use the back, the original back as a front, and make all that dead wood the actual feature of a main feature of the design. So this was I was committed to making this my front, and this was after I repotted. Now, the original level of the Nebari was all here, and it wasn't a great Nebari, but you know, sometimes we get what we get. But in doing the repotting, I found out a much better base down below, and I was lucky because I feel like the tree needed some height. It was a little too stocky, like almost like it was choking in a way, very short trunk. And it gave the tree a little more height, a little more elegance. So this was after I did the repotting. And this is when I had done a rough wiring on the canopy. And of course, this is, you can see how it treated the wood. That original scar that was about this size, actually made it a lot larger, and I joined it with the top of that trunk, just to really make it into a feature. The chopstick now indicates my new front, a detail of the carving, another detail. And with a lot of deciduous trees, the process is grow them out, cut them back, grow them out again, repeat that process many times through many years. This was no exception, and I needed to grow out a lot of areas because I wanted to improve the transition between the trunk, the primaries, into the secondaries. So this was a process that I repeated several times, you know, through the years that I had this. Actually, I didn't have this tree for that long, but I repeated this process maybe 2 or 3 times within the growing season. I was fertilizing these fairly heavily as well. And this is the tree, I believe 2 years later, and I'm going to show you in a second. So this is 2014 and 2016. Once again, it was defoliated. I was able to expedite that process by defoliation, but you can see the transformation between the original material and what was done to it, you know, 2 years later. I actually sold this tree shortly after I took this picture.
That's amazing in 2 years.
Yeah, it's very quick. It's definitely. I was actually. I have to say, I was pretty pleased with the performance that this tree gave me in the time that I had it. But hopefully, it's still doing well. The pot itself that you're looking at was not a final pot at all. And to be honest with you, this was not a tree that I would put in a show. Had I kept this tree, it needed much more redevelopment and refinement on the canopy. But this is just gives you an idea of what the tree, the final design will look like. It's just that now there was sections that were maybe the notes maybe were too long and I needed to shorten them, etc., etc. So it's a process of sort of going back and improving certain sections, etc., etc. And the pot itself was just for training purposes. It definitely was not a pot for or meant to be a final pot for the design. So I threw in a couple of conifers in here just for fun, and this is a deciduous conifer. This is a ball cypress, and I purchased this in December 2016. Unfortunately, you cannot tell in the picture, but I bought this for a couple of reasons. One, most of the ball cypress that at least that I've seen, a lot of them are collected monsters. They're huge and they're beautiful, right? But somebody had this small tree, ball cypress in a convention, and the size itself really appealed to me because it was so charming. It's only about 15 inches tall, and unfortunately you cannot see here, but it had a really wonderful flaring nebari already. So that was a second reason, of course, why I purchased the tree. It was like $60, I think, something like that. Anyway, so purchased this in December 2016, and I decided to style it that following year into an informal upright, typical informal upright, with the only exception that I kept a second apex. I wanted to give this tree something like almost like a conversation piece to it, in a way, always looking for ways to kind of add a unique element. And that's not always possible, right? But always trying to add something unique to a tree. In this case, I felt, well, maybe I can play with the idea of doing a second apex. Through the process, I became very dissatisfied with this design. It was like, I was really bored with it. I said, this is just looks like what it is. It's an informal upright. Yeah, it's okay, but I wanted something more from the tree. And somewhere along the lines, I got the idea of doing turning this into a whipping style ball cypress. So I took all the wires off. This was taken, I think, in October, I believe, and took all the wires off and restyled it into this, which was a whipping style. The only thing I kept from the original design was this little second apex right here. This is in the middle of summer. It's a picture that you guys had seen already in the first section. And this is this was actually taken last October of 2020. So it has developed quite quickly in about 4 years. And moving forward, what I like to do with this tree, I want to keep the sort of whipping effect, of course, but I'm envisioning this very thick cascade of branches, very dense going down, and obviously that's going to take me some time to build, but that's the intent. Now, as far as like how I train it, I started training them by wiring every single branch in the fall, but I found a way to kind of help me train it without using so much wire. And what I'm doing now is, in the middle of the summer, I build kind of like a cage, wire cage, around the entire canopy like this, and bending the branches down, keeping them kind of constrained. And by the time the leaves fall, already I have at least the main movements of those branches in place, so that I come in with fine wire and then wire all the fine branches just to refine the design. But the wire cage actually does help me a lot in terms of keeping the main sort of movements of the branches in place throughout the growing season rather than going up. Now, I'm definitely make work for myself, because the tendency, of course, is for a tree to grow upwards, right? So I understand that, and by doing this whipping style, I'm looking for extra work. I'm making extra work for myself, but I think it's been worthwhile. So I will only keep one of these. There's no way I'm keeping two or making more of these whipping styles. They're just way too much work to keep them kind of looking nice and whatnot.
Beautiful.
Any questions on this ball cypress? Okay. Jumping off into a Kiyohime, another disaster I had, which was, and this was a little bit different. This was a shohin at the time, the best shohin that I had, and this is was left of it, pretty much almost all dead. What happened was I kept in the refrigerator. Okay, Kiyohime likes to wake up early, and I put it in the refrigerator just to keep it kind of nice and cold. And what happened was the refrigerator just sucked the humidity out of the tree. And when I took it out, it was all desiccated except for one branch, which is the one that you're looking at right now. This was what was left of the tree. So I decided to do it instead of throwing the tree out, I decided to salvage it and make it into a cascade. Or at least that was the intent. And I turned it kind of, I changed the planting angle, planted in an oversized pot just so that it could develop. And the next 2 or 3 years, I was just kind of fumbling with the tree, making it into this cascade. And this is kind of what it was looking like before I decided to do something else with it. So here's a tree, and this is what I did with it. So I decided to kind of do something a little more interesting. To me, this was kind of like it was an average looking cascade. I guess it could have turned into a much nicer had I kept working on it, but I wanted to do something a little different. So I decided to plant it on a Chinese yin rock, which is quite beautiful. It's almost like a gravity-defying effect. And anyway, so this was done. And there's about 3 hours difference between the two pictures. So I had it all kind of planned out that, it went pretty quickly, from the whole process actually went pretty quickly. Oh, and this is a little bit of behind the scenes. I'm showing you guys how I was preparing the whole thing. I use muck to create kind of like a sort of like a container of sorts, so that I could put my akadama inside. Second conifer, this is a thuja, or better known as eastern white cedar or arborvitae. There's a lot of it up here in the Northeast. A lot of people keep them in their landscapes. This was actually collected in Vermont back in 2002 or 3. Now, I'm only taking partial credit for this tree because Suthin had done an amazing job. I got this tree from Suthin. And watch this. He did from this, he created this. This picture was taken, yeah, I know. This picture was taken in 2008 at the U.S. National, first U.S. National. And the tree was exhibited, at that show. And this is, I believe this is a picture from the show. Once again, he did a beautiful, incredible transformation from the collected piece to a more refined bonsai. And in 2015, he decided to sell the tree, and he sold it to me. And this is just right after I put it, it came into my garden. I took a picture, and this is how it was done. Now, thuja, most people tend to, including Suthin, they tend to style it in clumps, almost like a juniper in a way. And that would be the only departure. There's 2 departures that I did from what Suthin had done. And again, all respect goes to him because I think he did an amazing job really transforming this tree from what it was. But there's a couple of things. One, I felt like there was too much of a trunk here, and then all of a sudden all the life part was all the way in the right. I felt like I needed to kind of integrate the 2 pieces a little bit better So I needed to get a little more length on my fronds, basically on my foliage pads, in order to kind of bring them over and soften that trunk line going all the way on the top. Now, in the photograph, it looks like it was trunk chopped, but it's not. The tree had this natural shari, and then it turned down, and you'll see a picture in a second of how there's two main branches that just kind of beautifully just turn down and forming the entire canopy essentially of the tree. And here it is. It's got quite a bit of complexity on the top. And a lot of this work actually was done by Su Thin, like all the sharis and stuff like that. He created that stuff. And it really appealed to me, the complexity of those sharis, how they played against the foliage of the tree. But the difference was that I wanted to style the tree. The fronds of Thuja, even though can get kind of looking a little mangy, if you will, because they tend to grow upwards. But the base of those foliage has a tendency to have this curve, downwards curve growth pattern, and that gave me sort of the inspiration, if you will, to and you'll see in a second, to design my foliage pads sort of going towards has a downwards movement to it rather than upwards. Again, a lot of people tend to just pluck them, and they get these very thick foliage pads, very much like junipers. So anyway, here this was taken in, I believe, early October, and I let it grow that year, let it completely grow, because I knew it was going to be completely restyled. And this is how it was done. This was, I worked on this, I think it was November when I restyled the tree. The white stuff is snow that, the tree was sitting outside for a little bit, and then I brought it in to take some photographs because I thought the snow kind of looked sort of cool on the tree. But notice how the downwards motion of the foliage pads, and Thuja has a tendency to do that with their fronds, if you can manage that. Now, it does tend to have some fronds that kind of grow upwards, and those are the ones that you need to kind of manage and cut off. Otherwise, it'll just go back to what it was. It just looks really, again, kind of just doesn't look, just doesn't look clean. This is a photograph that I took 1 week before it was exhibited at the 2018 Nationals. And I had a table made by Austin Heitzman, very talented, cabinet maker, and he makes bonsai stands. And notice the downwards or the curved legs sort of mimic the downwards turn of the foliage. So that I try to kind of do, look at the whole thing as one piece of one design, basically. Also notice, and again, you saw in the previous picture, how I extended the foliage pads in order to soften your eye as it goes up the trunk. It just gives you a little more mystery, softens that trunk line more, rather than having the two separate pieces as it was, the green on the right and then just the trunk, the bare trunk on the left.
Yeah.
3 months later was exhibited at the Canapolis Winter Silhouette. This is what it looked like. Now, it's just the effect of the picture, because it looks like I put lime sulfur, but it's not. It's just the effect of the photograph. And when I purchased this tree in 2015, I knew that this tree had been exhibited at the first U.S. National. And my intent was that I wanted to exhibit it exactly 10 years after it made its first appearance in 2008. And I was lucky enough to get it accepted. So I was able to sort of reach my my goal, if you will, to have the tree exhibited 10 years after. So again, so here's the two.
Amazing.
All right, and that goes into the last and third segment of my deck. Before I go into the case studies, any questions on anything?
Lots of quiet.
All right, very good. I'll just jump into the case studies. Case study number one, Japanese maple. This is a picture that the growers sent me of the tree. I liked it. I bought it. This is back in 2008, I believe. And this is what the tree looked like. And that winter, I sort of was playing around with it. I was looking at it. It looked like it was going to be kind of like a informal upright of sorts. I made some cuts. You can see the cut paste in some areas. I was trying to edit certain things about the tree because it was really densely. I don't want to say ramified, but it just had too many branches. Let me put it that way. So I tried to kind of start creating some negative areas to try to look for something interesting. This is in 2008, I believe, this photo of second winter. But I then had I think 2 or 3 years passed, if I remember, and I became very dissatisfied with the overall look of the tree. To me, it was just an average tree, and I wanted to do something a little more, hopefully a little more special. So I set out to decide to change not only the front of the tree, give it a different front, but also create a twin trunk design. All right, and I'm gonna walk you through how I created a twin trunk design. So in order to do that, I needed to air layer a piece of or a branch of the tree. Otherwise, I could have grafted a branch or a trunk from another Japanese maple, but the problem is that you end up now with two trees that are grafted together, right? You'll end up with different autumn color, potentially different bark color, leaf shape, etc., etc. So you, in order to, that's not aesthetically acceptable, I would say. That's not acceptable, pleasing, although some people may find that kind of cool. But so I needed to get my future trunk out of this tree. So here's a photograph of the air layer, a detail of it, and you can see some of the roots kind of growing around the back already here. This is a tree after I had removed the air layer and changing the front. You can see now the front has sort of a sweeping elegance to it. And of course, the intent is that my second trunk will fill this space right here. This is a photograph of the actual air layer branch that I am going to use eventually to graft and create a trunk out of this, second trunk out of this. This was, I think, taken in like September, I believe. And it wasn't until the following spring that I did the graft. And this is what it looked like. So again, the tree has a new front, new sweeping kind of trunk line. And this is with the what used to be one of the first branches, now is becoming a second trunk. And if you're wondering about this little guy here, that was a root graft that I was doing in order to improve my nebari on the left side of the tree. Mm. This is about a year, 2 years later, I believe 2 years later, and you can see how much more ramified the tree is getting. Notice how my second trunk is doing quite well, and I'm letting it grow. I'm letting it extend so that the union of the two you know, basically the two trunks, it's solid base. You know, I'll show you some details in a second.
Oh,
This is a tree in about 4 years, I believe, after, or 5 years after. You can see how well developed it's gotten overall. And this is a detail of of that point where they fused together. So this was my original branch. Obviously, this is the trunk, and you can see that it's very well fused at this point. This is about 2 years after I had grafted it. The back of the tree, one unique aspect, or at least for me, is that this little crawling, what I call a crawling branch, facing the back of the tree, to me gave the composition kind of a unique and unexpected kind of detail. I could have cut it off for sure, but for me, you just added something unique to it. So
yeah.
The tree does get, like many Japanese maples, do get beautiful autumn color. In this case, it gets like a yellow orange. So here it is. And this is the this picture was just recently taken about 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago, I would say. So 2008, 2021. Again, through the techniques of grafting, that's what I love about it. You can actually transform a tree significantly from being one thing to the other. This is one reason why I love Japanese maples, is because they move their resources, their sugar and starches very quickly through their system, which means that you can perform a lot of these grafting techniques and such fairly quickly. You don't have to wait for years. You can do a lot of this stuff within one growing season. In this case, the grafting of that trunk, or that branch, was originally a branch to the trunk, took me about, I think it was, to complete it was about 1.5 years, only because the branch itself was already about 1/2 inch thick. So it was pretty substantial. So it took a while for it to completely fuse with the parent trunk. Any questions on this before I jump into the next case study? Okay. Root grafting. Again, I would highly encourage everyone to really, and maybe you guys are already doing it, to really master any types of grafting. Particularly with root grafting, you can really enhance, you can elevate the quality of your nebari quite substantially by just doing root grafting. It's not a technique that is meant to fix a really bad nebari, right? Anything that is kind of halfway decent, it can be improved. But because I know I have people coming to me with really terrible nebari. It's like, oh, we'll just do some root grafts here and we'll make it better. And no, in that case, the only solution would be to air layer and restart over your nebari. But in many cases, the nebaris that are decent, you can improve their quality quite a bit by just doing root grafts. So this is such a case, Japanese maple, and I had a problem, which was it had a big gap, as you're seeing here with the red line, between the two roots. There was a big gap. Now, the groove here that you're seeing here was from a previous failed root graft. So I was intent in trying again, and that's the thing with bonsai is even if you're doing everything right, Mother Nature sometimes tells you, not so fast, basically. When I was in one of my trips to Japan, again, it was in Taisho, and I saw a couple of junipers with a few dead grafts on the tree, and and even a master like that, he had dead stuff the stuff that failed, and I'm sure he did it perfectly. So that's the one thing, the challenge thing that we all contend with bonsai, you know, is that sometimes if we do everything right, it's not gonna work out. But in any case, so this was one of those cases that I felt like I did everything right, didn't work out, and he basically rejected the graft. So here I am going at it again. So I rescore that groove that I originally had. You can see the green, the newly exposed cambium layer. Of course, this is in preparation of for me to graft the seedling into that groove. And ideally, you want to do your root grafts while you're doing your repotting, right? In this case, I did not need any repotting. So what I needed to do is I cut out a sort of a pie-shaped piece out of the soil in order to accommodate the roots of my grafted seedling. And here's a detail of this Japanese maple seedling. This is the root that I am interested in using as part of the future, you know, part of the nebari. And here I am trying it to make sure that it fits correctly. It needs to fit in pretty snug in there. If the groove is too large or, you know, moves around, it's not going to be conducive for a successful graft. So it needs to be fairly accurate as far as the fit, you know, of all the parts basically. So after I make sure that my groove was the right width, I inserted my seedling. I scraped the side of the seedling in order to expose the cambium, and then I put a push pin in order to hold it in place. And notice how here already have my surface root lined up, you know, to be formed part of the future nebari. After everything is done, I cover everything with cut paste. And then I wired my seedling. And the reason for that is because, and this is just case by case, right? Sometimes you don't need to do that. In this case, the tree was fairly well ramified. It gets a very dense canopy. So I needed to push the seedling away from the canopy in order to for it to receive enough air and light. So I needed to wire it out of the canopy. And here's the completed procedure. The tree is back in its spot with some soil covering, you know, the pie shape that I cut previously. And here's, I forgot to put this slide in. So this is actually a different graft that I did, the same procedure, approach graft, root graft. This is on a trident, but notice what I do here is once I see that the two, you know, the seedling has fused with the parent trunk, I cut it off, but I don't cut it off flush with the nebari. I leave a little stub, as you're seeing here, let that naturally die back, and then I make my final cut flush with the nebari. And you can see here where I'm gonna, you know, my root that is going to be formed, that's going to become part of the nebari.
Sergio, do you
Yeah, go.
Do you take cuttings to get the seedlings that you're going to use for root grafts?
I buy them. I buy them from. You can certainly, of course, you can use the same ones from the tree. I don't find that that's necessary. The only exception that I find is when you're doing Arakawa, it has to be Arakawa. Otherwise, you'll end up with roots that have different surfaces, which is not good, of course. But you don't. I mean, if certainly this, you know, that would be the ideal, is taking cuttings from the same tree. but I find that that roots from a you know, a different seedling, they're basically indistinguishable by the time they all, you know, sort of fuse and everything, as you're seeing here. This is actually going back to 2 years after the graft took, and this is what my root looks like. You see here a little scar that eventually will close off, much like when you cut a branch or whatnot. But yeah, I don't find it necessary, at least for me, to get cuttings or air layers from the same tree in order to use it as root grafts later on that same tree.
Okay.
Any other questions on the root grafts?
So I got a question as far as after you do your root graft, what point do you wait till before you repot the tree? Because I'm not going to say like a specific amount of time because it's going to be different per case study.
Right.
But you know, at what point do you feel comfortable repotting the tree and actually doing some kind of work around that root graft?
Yeah, good question. I'm trying to kind of sort of remember what I'm doing. I would say, well, first of all, again, with in my experience with the root grafts, some of them take within the growing season, and I would say another percentage of them, maybe a third of them, I would say maybe a third of the root grafts that I do not take until the following year. I usually, you know, but say for example, if for argument's sake, let's say that they all take, right? They all have taken. I'm confident that the point of that union is well fused basically, and say that I'm checking this in like August, September. I'm like, oh my God, you know, it took well, and that tree needed repotting the following. I would say that with some care, but I think it can be done the following spring. You don't want to go at it aggressively, that part of it. But yeah, I would say that there is no issue with like, oh well, I have to wait another, I don't know, 2 years before. I think with good good amount of confidence you can do that, the following spring. But of course, if you have several going on and some of them have taken and some of them have not, then I say, you know what, I'm gonna have to wait, unless you're in a dire situation where for whatever reason the tree needs repotting. So then you may have to forego the failed grafts and then just chuck them or whatever and then do your repotting. But if everything is going well with the tree, I would then wait another year to give those grafts a chance to take to fuse with the nebari.
Okay, awesome.
Case study number 3. Okay, so and this one is a simple one, right, which I'm sure you guys have done, which is air layering. You may be surprised, and again, maybe you guys know this already, but in Japan, a lot of the kokofu, shohin, and even shuhin sized trees were created not from like seed or anything like that. They were created from air layers, which is, was kind of when somebody told me that, I was like pretty amazed about that. But the point here is that you can create, through air layering, you can create better material out of what maybe not so great material. And this is one of those cases. This is a beech that I got very cheaply. The tree had a couple of big issues for me. One, the nebari was awful. You cannot see in this picture, but the nebari was absolutely horrific. And the other thing is, all the ramification was on the top, and it had this long trunk. And for me, this would have never made a really good tree, no matter how hard I tried. I think the proportions were not where I felt like they were ideal for me anyway. the trunk was way too long, and there was nothing happening on the lower part of that trunk. So I decided to make a multi-trunk design out of this, just through the simple technique of air layering. And I do the ring method. I don't use a tourniquet, which is like putting that wire around it. That really usually has not worked for me personally. So I go a little more aggressively, and I use the ring method, which you're looking at now. Very quickly, I would say that 98%, I think, of the failed air layers are because folks do not clean this area completely off. They leave possibly part of that cambium alive in there, and what happens is the tree will what they call bridging, right? It would bridge before it actually produces roots. So you're not really encouraging, you're not forcing the tree to produce roots. You're kind of giving the tree an out by leaving some of those cells alive. So you need to make sure that you clean that whole thing all the way to the sapwood. The cut on the top is the most critical one, where, or at least the way I do it, is like 90-degree into the trunk, not at an angle, but very clean with a very sharp knife, grafting knife, and go all the way around the trunk. And then just peel everything off, making sure that the distance from the top to the bottom is enough, because that's the other problem, is like some folks just cut it maybe just this width, and what happens is it's just too it's just not wide enough, and the tree may bridge, may join the top with the bottom, and that will not sort of entice a tree to produce roots. So it has to make sure that the width of this is wide enough. If you read books, I've read somewhere, I think the golden number is, or measurement is, like a width and a half of the trunk. I don't measure. I just want to make sure. I just eyeball it, and I just want to make sure that it's wide enough so that the tree doesn't get any ideas about joining the top with the bottom, and force the tree basically to produce roots on the top cut. Here is the air layer completed. I usually use sphagnum moss with clear plastic. There's some folks that say that black plastic is better. I've tried both, and I've gotten success with both. I don't think that the black necessary or is necessary. I think I think the thought is that if you use black, it would prevent light from getting in. But the truth of the matter is, by the time you do that big ball of sphagnum moss, everything in there is going to be dark. So again, I've used both to equal success. Just to give you a perspective, with Japanese beech, they're notoriously again, not only difficult but also difficult to air layer, and even more difficult to get roots all around the trunk. In this case, it worked out. It produced quite a bit of roots, but while I can air layer Japanese maple in about 8 weeks or so, this beech took me a year and a half before I was confident enough to be able to separate it from the parent trunk. So a year and a half later, this is where I am, and I'm about to separate the top from the bottom, and you can kind of see my multi-trunk happening here, or my future multi-trunk, I should say. Here I am separating it from the bottom, and I am ready now to pot it. Now, I've heard people saying, well, after they separate it, they immediately work on those roots, with the intent of trying to kind of make them pretty and all radial and all that stuff. I would recommend for anybody that does air layerings not to do much of that at all, because the roots are very tender, and you're likely to damage them. So the idea here is not to worry about how pretty your nebari is or even the design of the tree. The idea here is making sure that that air layer survives. So I just tease the outside so that the akadama, usually use akadama, gets into the into the sphagnum moss, but that's about the extent of the work that I do on the roots. So as you can see, I'm here getting ready to pot, the tree or my new air layer. And you can see here a year later, again, where I'm going with this. Again, I did not wire it because wiring does tend to weaken, the trees a bit. So I just at this point, I just wanted for my air layer to survive. And I think I did a sketch. This is a sketch I did of the tree, maybe, I don't know, 10, 15, perhaps 20 years down the line. And this is my intended design. Any questions on this speech or air layering?
So just real quick, it kind of looked like the bag was open there. So when you do your air layers, do you try to seal the bag or do you leave it open so you can constantly water it and make sure it stays moist?
Sure. So I do leave it. This was a little bit, the picture you see here, it's a little more open than I usually leave it. But yes, they're left a little bit open on the top, just to make sure that it gets a little water once in a while. I mean, I don't water every time, just because sphagnum moss does tend to, especially with the plastic, it's pretty damp. Yeah, I leave it. Just to so that the pull the thing that I do well. I know that some don't do that, but I like to make sure that the water drains freely from the air layer. Okay. So that is
Sergio, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I don't know about others, but I've lost you on audio.
You guys can hear me?
Now, yes, now I can.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
I can hear you now.
Got it. So just to repeat myself, this is a trident maple. Let me go back. Okay. And I purchased this tree about 2 years ago. And this is about this case study just to show you guys the procedure for closing wounds, large wounds. And so this was one of those cases where the back of the tree had a really large cut. I did not see it because when I bought the tree, it was in leaf. I didn't know that there was a scar there, but it was all covered with this sort of latexy kind of material. I don't know what it was. I think it was, this tree was imported from Japan. I don't know how it was imported, but it was imported from Japan. And when I peeled that off, this is what I saw, this weird scar that was not only rotted inside, but it had a lip, as you guys can see here, growing upwards. So it was really, really bizarre. So I needed to kind of address that. So I'm not sure if you guys have experienced this, but whenever a tree will never heal properly or heal at all over rotted wood. It just needs a stable surface in order to roll over. the cadmium layer. Otherwise, it will just not do it. So this was one of those cases where, again, the wood was rotted, and that's why that scar ended up looking as ugly as it does right now. So I needed to clean all the rotted wood with a Dremel. I went in there, as you can see, and I cleaned all that stuff out until I found solid wood, underneath. After that, I dusted the whole thing, making sure that the whole area was very, very clean. And the next step was to, no, I'm sorry. So I'm showing here with the Dremel all the work that I did, all the cleanup work that I did. So it was pretty, fairly deep, significant wound on the back of the tree. So in Japan, they use concrete, cement. I don't know if they still use that much, but in order to fill the gap in there, the hole, the cavity, they use concrete. But there's a lot of folks nowadays that are using two-part epoxy. This is a brand that I use, that is Quickwood. You can find that easily at Lowe's or Home Depot. And it dries to like really, really hard after just a few minutes. So here I'm kneading that, the chemical, and then I apply it. It's like a putty, and making sure that the contour of my putty kind of falls along the lines of my trunk line. Next step, here's another picture of it, of the entire cavity filled with the two-part epoxy. And the next step is to score the edge of it, of the cadmium, in order to encourage the tree to roll over to keep rolling over the cadmium layer. So with a sharp knife, I got in there and I scored all around the perimeter of that scar. And then the last step was to put some cut paste around the cut. It's not necessary to put it over the center because there's nothing happening there yet. And I believe, yeah, this is not the same tree, but I wanted to show you guys because I just did that one. I just did this whole thing about a month and a half ago or 2 months ago. And this is another example of a Japanese maple, actually, with a smaller wound, but it was similar procedure. But notice how nicely it closes. So again, great way to kind of be able to close those wounds. I have another Japanese maple, large Japanese maple that when they sold it to me, the owner didn't know why it wasn't rolling over that wound. And he kept putting all kinds of product in there, but the problem was that wood was rotted. So again, if you're having issues with your trees callousing over an area, just look into that, because most likely that wood may be rotted underneath. So this is an effective way to kind of fix those kind of large wounds rather than just leaving your tree just basically as they are with those ugly scars. And that's it, guys. Again, if you guys want to look at some more of my work, m5bonsaiworks.com, that's my website, and you can come and visit me there. And I thank you very much.
Amazing.
Let me I'm gonna stop sharing. Yeah, sorry. Okay, I'm back now.
Thank you, Sergio. That was a wonderful presentation. And one thing I want to add, because I didn't mention it at the outset, but it's on his website, is that Sergio is a also a graphic designer. And if any of you have seen Michael Hagedorn's new book, Bonsai Heresy,
Oh yeah.
Sergio did all the wonderful illustrations in this book. You know, these whimsical, beautiful illustrations. And so, you know, this is a multi-talented person. And I think obviously a wonderful bonsai artist as well.
Do we have any final questions for Sergio?
I have one. I mean, Sergio, I'd just like to know, what's your background? I mean, what's your training? How did you get to be where you are today?
Yeah, I would say Dan, that my training, I am a trained painter artist by trade, basically, and that I have to say that has helped me figure out the artistic part of bonsai, essentially. And I'm still, obviously, you know, you never have figure out. It is one of the most difficult things that I have had to do as an artist, to believe it or not. I think only because this thing, you know, trees are alive and they evolve and they evolve. It's not like you do a painting or a drawing and it's done, it's finished, you frame it and you hang it and it'll be there forever and ever. You're working with a living piece of, or a living entity. And it is I find it extremely, not only fascinating, but a difficult art form. But anyway, so all to say that my training as an artist has really helped me kind of figure the artistic part of bonsai. And for me was the horticulture part that I needed to kind of really sort of study, because that's really not my background. I always had a little bit of a green thumb, but I needed to understand a little more what, you know, what trees do and what they do, what, you know, why they do what they do, basically. So that I could, you know, everybody knows, right, that without a living tree, you have no bonsai. So the horticulture part is extremely important because you need to keep your trees in top health. But that's sort of my background.
Great, thank you.
Sure, thank you.